What I had in mind was what's called a triangular box. And you might remember from a few months ago, I did a stacked pagoda box that was all triangles. There were 5 levels on that. I had it at the fair. And very similar, except this one, instead of those wings, kind of just went out. This one you turn and you make the wings drop down and you make them lower than this, so when it's suspended. And of course I set this on this stool, knocked it off and broke the leg. So okay, teach me a lesson. But if you do it like this and you make a little bowl in here and you make a ledge in here that's square, you can make a dome lid for the box, okay? So I don't know if I'll do that. It depends on how much time I got and whether I really want to go there or not tonight. So that's how you would make this into a box, all right? You could also do the same kind of thing where you can make these go one on top of each other. All you got to do is make the tenon at the bottom of this box what is essentially the lid for this box, and then make another box, and the one on top, they just keep on going up. So anyway, I started, I'm going to use the other piece of wood that I cut this from. And so what you do is you start just making yourself a little template. So in this case I had 12-inch wide 8-quarter wood. So I decided to make these, I think it's 6, whatever. Let me get my ruler. Eight. So I made these 8 inches. And so what I did, 8 inches, came in 4 inches and drew a vertical. And then that gives me the basic layout. And then all I do is come from this corner and come up till it crosses that midline at 8 inches. All right. And then I do the same thing on the other side, and where that cross is over this center line, that gives me an equilateral triangle so that it's 8 inches on all sides. Then what I do is I measure the midpoint, so I measure 4 inches, and I mark each of these corners at 4 inches, and then all I do is go between that mark and the far corner and draw a line in the center. Do it from 2 different ways, and that gives me the center point. All right, so you have to be pretty accurate when you do this. The fact is you can turn it. That's not a problem. You know, it's not going to blow up on you if you don't have this exactly in the center. But where you see it is right here. The width of this leg from one to another. All right. If you have it off, you might get 2 of these okay and 1 wider or 1 narrower, and it'll be obvious. So you can sand it a bit, and do all of that. But it's the more accurate you are in the layout, the more symmetrical this whole thing will be. Okay. So once I do that, the next thing to do is when you cut it out. If you can set up a jig and cut it on your table saw, you're going to get less sanding you have to do on the edges. But it's a lot easier to cut it on the bandsaw. But if you cut it on the bandsaw, you're going to leave yourself a lot of marks, bandsaw marks along the edge that you have to sand out. And I've got a thing I saw at Keith's house. I bought one of them, which is an oscillating belt sander. It's rigid, so the belt's only about this long, but it's a belt sander, moves up and down, and has a table. So I can just sit this against there go around until I get them all smooth. You also have to realize that in this case the grain's running this way, all right? So these 2 points are going to turn very different than this point, okay? A lot more end grain that you have to deal with, a lot weaker, all right? You can just see if you got this really thin, the grain going like this, you could snap that piece off fairly easily where you can't snap these off. So you have to be pretty delicate when you're doing here. But after I cut it, I'll take it and sand it as much as I can, or as much as I can stand. You can still see there's still some bandsaw marks in here. I just got tired. And then you drill the hole. And now when I'm sanding, I'm being very deliberate, all right? 10 cycles, 10 cycles, 10 cycles. I don't want to do it off balance. I have to be very conscious of me getting it square onto that belt. Now, let's say you don't have an oscillating belt sander. What can you do? Well, if you've got a regular disc belt sander, or you've got, you can make a platen to go on your lathe, all right, and have a table. So you have a big, just get a 12-inch or 15-inch, make a disc out of MDF, put it on here, buy a big sanding disc with adhesive on the back and glue her down, and then you can do it this way, all right? So that's a little lower cost way, but one way or another you need to have the edges pretty smooth, and you need to have this pretty equally sanded down. You can get away with it not being so equal, but then you have to go ahead and you have to remeasure everything to determine where the exact center is again, all right? So once I get the exact center, you drill a hole. Now I drilled this tonight for the depth if I was going to make an oil lamp, all right? This one is drilled to the depth for a tea light, where you're just going to put a tea light in with the aluminum shell around the candle. But what I'm going to do there, I would do the process is the same. Now I may turn this out to a little bowl. I don't think I'm going to make a box tonight. That will take a little bit longer because I got to do jam chucking and all that stuff. So I think what I'll do is maybe I'll turn this into a bowl. That'll be pretty deep for a bowl because I got to be very conscious of how much, since I have to make a tenon on this side and I have to have the legs long enough that is suspended, all right? So I can't have it this hole so deep that I can't make that shallow like that. Anyway, you're going to drill a hole right in the center. You don't even need this much. A 1/4 of an inch is plenty to hold it in expansion mode, all right, on your lathe. But you need to do that first. But I just as soon do it for the depth of what I'm going to be working on. The deeper, of course, I like to use these jaws, all right, because they're going to give me, nothing's coming off of that, okay? That's in there pretty dang deep, so.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's step one. I'm going to have this mounted. Let's see how true that runs. Not too bad. So that's pretty true. You want to make sure that when you're on there, especially if you're using a shallower drill, that it doesn't do this, because that'll also mess up the legs, all right? So the first thing you think you may want to do is start turning it, but not. This is going to be the top. And if you see how I've laid this out, here are the growth rings coming this way. I want this to be the bottom and this to be the top, so that, because the legs are going to come up like that, and let's not fight where that grain's going, okay? So since this is going to be on the top, that's the side I drill first. What I have to do now is create a tenon on the bottom so I can actually turn the top, all right? And I'm going to do that just by turning a recess in here. Now it's a little small. Now you can do that. You can get that all clean with the parting tool like that. Or I like to use a box scraper because that gives me pretty good control. And also I like to make sure that this tenon is whatever is required by your chuck. So a dovetail or whatever. Okay? The width of this recess here, okay, is going to be dependent on your chuck jaws. Sometimes the jaws are pretty thick, and so you may have to do a little bit more relief. In fact, I might do just a little bit more just for grins. Oh. And now I'm going to flip it around. So again, the size of that tenon has to be appropriate to the size of your chuck jaws. I might slow that down a little bit. Let's see. Okay. That's still running pretty true. All right, so now I'm just going to turn a bowl, a drooping bowl. But it's the same. Think about this as if I'm going to want to turn this into a bowl the regular way, and then I'm going to taper this back so that the legs come back down to here. If I try and make them a point, all right, that's going to mean I have to be really accurate with the way I've set it up initially, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be pretty tough to do, all right? Now, the other thing you can do is if you're a little nervous, well, that's where they store it, but you can't go over this joint with it in there. You can bring your live center up, okay, and at least right now you can be working on the, not like that.
The trajectory of the isosceles triangle is proportional to its base times its mass.
Don't you love a smart
Is it going that
ass?
way or this way?
Okay,
That's to get the new guy.
Yeah.
so that's pretty tight. I guess I can start doing this now a little bit that way. Normal, just to hold on to this a little bit. But the thing I like about using these long jaws too is I'm holding it farther away from the chuck. So I have a little room here, and then you have to have a long enough ram extension that you can still get it and the banjo in there. I have about 1/8 of an inch between the tool rest and this, and that's, unless I move this back farther, that's about all I'm going to get. Now I use a bowl gouge for doing this. And actually, everything, you can do it if you had a standard grind and you took this out of the way, you could actually make a cut like this, all right? But because I have a fingernail grind bowl gouge, I'm going to do it as a draw cut rather than a push cut, all right? And when you're doing this, the force that you're using with your hand is not against the wood, all right, because you're a lot of air, so you don't want it to do this. So what I'm using this hand for is to hold it down on the tool rest, all right, and then I'm just moving across there. I'm not really relying on the wood to do a ton of support. All right, and where you're looking is here. You're looking up here because that, you can see that the angle and everything that you're cutting up at the top. You can see that ghost image. And you want to be very careful at the bottom. Now, frankly, when it comes to this, because the farther I get down that curve, the farther I am away from the tool rest, all right? So what I would prefer to do here is to turn this, bring it up, not quite that close. Okay, I got a lot more work to do, but I want to see just where it is in relation to the foot. Now that foot is about 1/8 of an inch wide. That one's about a 1/16, and this one is about 3/16. So I'm not going to be perfect. That's the bottom line here, and I'll have to do some hand sanding when I get down the road here. So what I'm going to want is a smooth curve all the way from the bowl. Now on this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this into a little bowl here. So I'm going to use this line right there as the outside rim for the bowl. And so a thing I like to do is I'm going to make a little raised lip. I just like that transition between the bowl and the legs. And then from the bottom of that outside bead, so eventually this is what it's going to look like. There's going to be a bowl, it's going to have a bead, and then that leg is going to come down, okay, like this. I'm going to cut this bead right now, or actually with the tailstock on there, I'm just going to cut here to define where that bead is going to be, all right? And then my goal is to make a fair curve all the way down here, as smooth as I can do it, no bumps, none of that. So I'm going to come in here And I'm just going to do a little plunge. I can fix that up as the bead later on when I pull this away and start working on the front. And if you'll notice how I get in next to that bead is I'm holding the bowl gouge almost closed and bringing the nose right up in there and then opening it up. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that doing these drop legs is a whole lot easier than doing just a straight out triangle. That's like a saw blade. You can't bring your hand anywhere near this close. You have to basically come from this side or this side and then do the underneath. You couldn't have your hand over here because that thing's spinning like that. So. Okay, so can everybody see there's a pretty good bump right in here? So that's what I got to get rid of. Okay, I'm going to move my rest a little bit closer. Okay, I have a little bump here, but the rest of this isn't too bad. I'll make a cleaning cut, and this is maybe a little square, so maybe I want to come down a little bit more. And then, just like you would for a bowl, I'm doing the cutting with right here on the that part of the wing, right there. And so, because that gives me a little smaller diameter, I will get a few ridges in here I have to deal with, but just like I would smooth a bowl, I'll use a shearing technique where I'll drop the handle, almost close the gouge, and just lightly bring this across. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen that before. When you do that, the shavings you get are much finer. All right, and I've gotten rid of a lot of that. Maybe one more of those, and I have a little bump right here. One of the things you'll notice too is that transition. When I go from solid wood into air, it's very easy to get a bump there. And you can go back and forth on this. Okay. So I'm going to pull this out of the way. Okay, I still have a little divot there I have to get rid of, but that's fine. I'll do that here. In fact, I think I'm going to take this off. I only want so many holes in my elbow. All right, so I have to smooth out right there. All right, I think that's probably okay. Yeah, all right. And now I'm going to start taking out the bowl. You know, I told Jim I wasn't going to need this, but I am going to, oh, he has it open. I'm going to, Tom, do you think you could get him to open up? I need a bigger chuck because I'm going to do a bowl. And I thought I'd do a tea light. Now, if I was doing a tea light, I would have brought this all the way up to here, and then I would have flipped it over and started doing the tea light. But since we have enough time, I'm going to just do a bowl. And this is regular bowl. Too high? Now, had I been in my mind that I would have been doing a bowl tonight, I probably wouldn't have drilled it quite so deep. All right, but that's okay. I think I'll be fine. You do have a bigger chuck with a 1 1/4.
No, little 1 1/4.
Oh. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Okay, so I'm past the spur of the Forstner bit I used, and so to make this a little easy on me, I'm just going to only X number of handles in here, but it is just freaking amazing how many times you can pick up the wrong one. So I'm just going to use a little scraper. Okay, and so if you have an easy tool or a hook tool, whatever you can use, whatever you would use to do a bowl this size. All right. So that's pretty fair. I like that. So I'm going to use a spindle gouge very carefully. Turn the bead. In fact, I'll scrape up a little bit on this side. All right. Yeah, I'll take that. So, what you got to do now is a little sanding. I have some other sandpaper, but
What do you need?
ooh, I got a chip. I gotta recut this leg. That's all right. I'll do it with what I got. I got 220 on. Right here. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. I don't know when that happened. And I will say that harder woods make this is an easier thing. Softer woods, this is soft maple, will tend to do a little more chipping, as you can see on this trailing edge here. All right. So I got to get rid of that. Mark that so I know where it is. Okay. So of course this is changing everything again. Okay, that's fine. Okay, great. Okay, it's gone. So let's refine that a little bit more. Again, I'm going to do that shear scrape. And you can just see that finer shavings coming off when I do that. I will say one thing you have to do is you really have to pay attention to where your tools are going. It's really easy to just bring your tool back in and not pay attention, and all of a sudden you're whacking one of these corners, especially when you're doing the inside. Okay. Now, let me do a little sanding before I talk about the next step. Now, obviously, you can't sand this whole surface, right? You can only sand a little past where it's solid wood, and then you have to do it this way. And this, well, you have to, this one, not so bad, but you have to be careful on how much pressure you put. Not so much now because you got all this wood behind you, but when you get the inside in, you want to be careful because you can snap off some of these legs. You can see how soft this maple is. Now I'm not going to sand this like I would normally, just for the sake of time. But I'm fairly pleased with the way this turned out. That's a reasonable curve here. All right, it's rounded up in here, not flat. One of the things that's easy to do is have it flat across here, and then it kind of looks flat, and then with the legs, and that just doesn't cut it like it should. And I'd go through all the grits, of course. Now, and I could obviously do to sand this a little bit, but now the issue is, how do I chuck it up? When it's a tea light, there's no problem at all, because you've already drilled your hole, you just put it back the same way you originally had it. But if it's like this, how are you going to chuck that up to hold it? Well, if you do it with like I'm going to do it now, I'm going to do it with this in expansion mode. So for me to do that, I can't have a smooth, rounded inside. And this would be the same thing that you'd have to do if you're going to make a box. I have to give myself a little ledge. So I could use the box scraper, I could use a skew. I'll use a skew. And I'm just going to come down in here. And what I'm doing is I'm watching carefully, aligning the edge of my skew with the edge of the ways. All right? So I know I'm coming in really parallel and it's not jagging in or out. All right? And I can sand that out later, but if I was doing a box, that's where the lid would slip in, do the slip fit into. All right? Let me just. All right, so now I'm gonna flip it around, do the underside. Anybody else do this kind of thing? Because I just wondered, there are a couple of different techniques. For some of these I've actually turned the bulk of it, the bulk of this, when it was still this way. Because with those jaws there, it sticks out from the chuck far enough I can get my gouge in there a bit. So I'm going to want to bring up my tailstock for this again. Let's hope these go out wide enough. No. Well, we're going to have to see if I can cheat a little bit. myself a little more room. Okay. Not too bad. Well, maybe I just moved just a hair that direction. I'm going to turn down the speed a little bit. Did everybody see what I had to do? The jaws wouldn't come wide enough. All right? So because I had a flat spot, all I did was go on the base of the jaws. I'm actually not gripping it here, I'm gripping it right here. All right? On the outside edge of the jaws. There's nothing to really hold it there. No teeth, no dovetail. So that's why I have to use, for now, I have to use this. Now, another way I could do that would be to turn a jam chuck. All right? And I could put a jam chuck on this side. If I have to, I'll do it. I brought some wood to make a jam chuck out of, in case I needed to.
You could put another 16-inch groove further down the hole.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to keep that bowl as pristine as possible. So let's see how this looks. That's not bad. Not bad. So again, this is going to be a little in the way, but we'll see what I can do. Ooh, more in the way than I thought. So again, you can look here, and as I get more of that out, you'll be able to see the ghost of the leg start to see how that looks. You can see it's starting to taper thicker. All right, but that's not too bad. I'm going to make that thinner, all right, but you're basically seeing how you do that cutting. So I'd love to be able to I have an Ellsworth grind on here. So I'm actually cutting, because of the sweep he's got here, I could actually turn that gouge a lot more like this and still have support on this side and cut. Where if I was cutting this as a regular bowl and had that supported, or like I would for the tea light, I'd be in here like this, all right? So, I'll give you one other piece of advice. Have this as thin as you want it before you go up any higher than this, all right? Because once you start getting up here and this starts flexing, you don't want to come back down to it. You want to start with the thickness that you want at the foot and take that all the way up. Okay, you also know that in the end, you're going to want to get rid of that. This is going to be a bowl. And this is one of those things that you've defined your lip, right? you've defined that right there. That's the lip of the bowl. So you're starting already now to plan that trajectory from coming from this bottom, and eventually I'll just take this, nibble this tenon off, and I'll want that a sweep so that this underside, right, the underside of this leg comes up, and the bowl, this is a continuation of that curve from the bead. All right. You don't want this bowl to end here. You don't want it to end there. All right. You want to have it match up with the outside of the bead. I'm going to waste away some of this again, because I have a pretty good idea where my bowl's going to go. And if you want a feel for where you've been, all right, don't have the cutting edge so pointed in. Back it out a little bit and go in to feel where the bevel is rubbing, but you're not cutting. And then swing into the cut. There, I can feel it hitting. I just swing this a little bit more into the cut. All right, so I know I'm going to leave this thick just because I don't have it chucked up and I don't want to pull this away. But you can see I'm cutting up all the way into here. So I'm going to start cutting into this, and then I'm going to go back and start refining the bowl again. Going to waste some of this wood. Feel for it, and then cut. Okay, now I'm up to solid wood. Yeah. I'm up to solid, almost. Okay, I got a little bit right there, but I need to come all the way back to here and refine that a little bit. Okay, I'm going to do a little more work on the bowl. Tool rests a little high. This is where you want to be really careful right here. All right. Okay. Can you see through there? Can you see this here and how I'm right now looking at that bead, and I'm trying to match that up. Okay. And as I'm going here, as I'm cutting up to that bowl, I'm going to continuously be closing the gouge, so by the time I come up to the edge of the bowl, it's closed. So I'm not going to catch that bowl on the right wing. See how we're doing? Okay, still a little fat in here. I've taken care of most of that. I can take care of just a little bit more. The bowl still needs to come in down at the bottom, but I'm getting close. Okay. I need to fix this bowl a little bit, and I need to take a little bit more there, but I'm getting pretty close. Now, very often, if I'm at home and I don't have this tailstock in the way, I'll come across this direction and cut on the other wing. So I need to spare this up. Right, now I can start. You need to be really careful because I right here can hit the feet. Okay. I'm not probably going to do too much more. Now, at this joint right here, that's pretty hard to do with a bowl gouge. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and use a detail spindle gouge, and I'm going to come down and cut down to where I think the bottom of that curve is, rest the bevel, and then cut across, and that gives me a pretty sharp corner right in here. It matches up pretty well. This bowl matches up pretty well with there. All right. It's not too bad. And then I would come along if I don't have a vacuum chuck or a jam chuck going on. And yeah, you can do that a little bit more, but okay. I want to get this out of the way for a minute. You can see what happened here too is that that wasn't located in the center, because you can see how much thicker this one is than this one. All right, but okay, that's how it goes. And just be careful. Now, as much as you'd like to be able to do this part power sanding, you can't. There's really no. You can do the outside. You can get a angle grinder or sanding with a sanding disc on it and stuff. That'll work, but not on the inside. You can't really get in here. Even with a soft foam one, because it'll cut one corner or another, even if you use a 2-inch. Maybe you get away with some of it with a 1-inch, but you have to do all of this by hand. And so I'm not going to go through all of that, but you have a choice here now of, do you want to keep these edges really sharp? Do you want to soften them up? You can come back and you can take just a little sandpaper and go along the edges and break those corners. It depends on what you want to do, all right? And again, it's just this isn't held tight enough. Well, it's not too bad. Should I try it?
Sure, just give us a second.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. Bob's not here, right?
Not here yet, that's what I was starting to say.
If you're gonna do it, you can wrap this around the jar and
Yeah.
around.
All right.
Give it a good tight wrap and it'll give you the 2-second warning.
Yeah.
Okay, turn this,
Yeah.
which way? Towards you?
Yeah, that's all right. No, the other way. Yeah. That's good enough. All I'm gonna do is take off that little tip. I'll just turn it down a little bit more. This is just a little high. There we go. And again, this is how I would have done it. It's just a straight cut. And then okay. And I'd go through the grits and there you go. And so if you take a look at this, you can see because I did it on the outside edge of those jaws and it gave me complications because to get in there and do the bowl, the back of the bowl with the tailstock in the way was a real pain. All right, but on the other hand, I had nothing mar the inside here. And so that little set of jaws or that little step I put in here, that would be where the inside, this is a little flat right here. And so if I wanted to do a top to this, put a little handle on it, it would slide down right against that little step that I made. And then you would have a nice fit, all right?